about the module system commands. So here, we find software module versions. We already did that a little bit. Load a module, which potentially has prerequisites. And see what happens when you load default versus a specific version. You can unload software modules, including specific versions, and all modules with module purge. So let's see what happens there. And that is what I showed here earlier. List the loaded modules and get information about a module. And then we're also going to try and look at module collections. So we already was finding some software versions. And to repeat, if you just load a module without giving the version, you may get the default version, or at some centers you actually get an error. I believe HPC2N is now throwing an error if you don't ask for a specific version. And there are good reasons for it, even if it's possible. Default version is often the newest, and that means the default will change the next time a newer version is installed. That could break your code, give different results. In any case, be bad reproducibility. Also, sometimes maybe you actually need a specific version, which is not the one the center has as default. And this we already covered. So module spider, always use it at those 4 centers. It's recommended. And at NSC, module avail is recommended to find the modules, but you still find the versions with module spider because it's listed in a nicer way there. And I guess you already tried this, but let's try it with LUNARC as well. And then you can see here there are different versions. So let's try and look at one of them. And then we have one of the situations where a module can be loaded directly. So this does not have prerequisites. And let's try UML. Nothing is loaded. And then let's try load this one here. And then you get some information, which is that the executable has a specific name. It's called GMX. And it also tells you that it's an TNPI version with NVIDIA's GPU support with CUDA. And that it cannot use multiple compute nodes in parallel. So useful information. And it also hits you how you load it for GPUs. So let's see what it loaded. And it loaded this one module. Everything that it has of prerequisites is bundled into it. Module unload. Do the same. And this here are just showing how it looks at different centers. HPC2N and LUNARC are very similar, to the point where also they usually have the same modules and versions, not completely, but to a large degree. C3SE also is somewhat similar, but has their modules named differently. At PDC, there is one thing to pay attention to. If you just use Python, it doesn't really have much of anything in it. You should use Cray, Python, but we will talk about that a little bit more. With module avail and bookmarks, you can get all the versions with module avail, and you can load them directly. At NSC, there were, you see some of them here with module avail. Those are the ones that can be loaded directly. The ones you got with module spider can only be loaded with prerequisites. So this is sort of a hybrid way they have done it at NSC. And at C3SE, you will get a lot of output if you just search for Python, but if you search for Python with capital P, you'll get mostly what you want. So that is good. And I believe you already checked this in the previous section. But you could check if you get the same output for Python with capital P and with lowercase p. So let's take 1 minute and do that. So listing loaded modules. You already tried this, but module list can also be written ML. And that is the short version. So module list or ML. Right now, I have nothing loaded here. There is only the sticky module. And I should probably say that sticky modules are generally some environment variables that are being set and shouldn't be removed. So we'll leave them there. So, of course, in order to load modules, we need to know how. And this differs by center. Some have prerequisites, some not, as we already said. And generally, if you find it with module spider, but not with module avail, it has prerequisites. So that is actually a good way of checking it. And some centers, more specifically NSC, will give you different hits depending on module avail and module spider. And you will be able to load the ones directly that you get with module avail, but not the ones they have that you only see with module spider. So that is an interesting difference, and we could try and do that again here. So module avail and module avail Python. Then we can load, for instance, this one here directly. And then it loaded that. Let's purge it. Let's try again and find some other Python versions with spider. That 3.11 file here. What happens if I try to load that directly? Actually does it. Which is interesting because it claimed that to be prerequisites. Let's try and finish it. Yeah. Here it says you need to load these before you can load Python 3.11. But it actually loads it even if you don't. And I have a very strong suspicion that it's not going to work then. So be careful at NSC. Sorry, Rebecca.
it loaded a different version. So when you don't load those prerequisites, it loads this INV HPC1 version instead.
It did. You're very right. You're very right. It did. It actually loaded this other version of Python. But if you want the ones that have everything in it, I guess, then you load the prerequisites first. So there are some things at NSC that works a little bit different than at the other centers. The other centers are generally either flat, where you can load everything without prerequisites, or hierarchical, where you have to have prerequisites. But NSC is somewhere in between, where some of the modules requires prerequisites and some don't. So it's different. And I have gathered this here. One thing to pay attention to for bookmarks, you can generally load everything directly there except when it's related to bioinformatics. And bookmarks is also currently changing from Rackham and Snowy to Pelle and Maya. So things are more like on NSC, on Pelle, the new system. This we have already done. So load the prerequisite if it's required, then load the module. And if you unload a prerequisite without unloading the module that it needs, that it needed it, it will generally do it, but complain. And an example can be done for HPC2N. Let's see. This is the one we already did for NSC. Yes, this is also something to say. This is important. When you load modules and they have prerequisites, they must be done in order. You cannot load a prerequisite after the module that needs it. It must be done in the correct order. And if you load the modules, you can load them all on one line, or you can load them one at a time. The advantage to doing it one at a time is that then all the versions that it will show you are the ones that are compatible. So you maybe the hierarchical site you are at, you have loaded GCC 13.2.0, and then Python 3.11.5 is the only option. And that means that in reality, after loading this, you could simply load Python without saying the version because it has only this one available after that. The same thing goes then for prerequisites for those, which is, for instance, the SciPy bundle. It only shows you the ones that are compatible. SciPy bundle are a bundle of Python packages that are at several centers, and it contains things like NumPy and SciPy and pandas. And this is important to know because if you do a ML spider on pandas, you will not get any hits, but it's inside SciPy bundle. You see, it doesn't find it. So let's look at this here. Help SciPy bundle. You need to load it first, that's true. Let's see how I load it. And here it actually tells me, see, pandas is included. And you need, again, the build tool, the GCC to build it. But then you have pandas, numpy, scipy, and other things here. So that is good. And of course, there are situations where you need several modules even when there are no prerequisites. For instance, Python packages some centers have a lot of Python packages included with the base Python. Others have very little or nothing. HPC2N has very little. UPMAX has basically every package there is, and the remaining are in the Python ML packages. NSC has very, very little in the basic Python. It has the SciPy bundle, and it has a PyPy bundle, which also has some, but most of it you need to install yourself. Yeah, it's the Python bundle, PyPy. So unloading modules, why do you even want to do it? Well, if you want to use a different version, you need to unload the current one first. That is not necessarily the case at PDC. It will attempt to unload and load by itself, which is good because you cannot do module purge. If you need a different version of a dependent module, but it's not compatible with the current prerequisite you have loaded, then you need to unload. Module unload module may or may not work, depending on whether or not there are prerequisites. Or at PDC, there are definitely a number of things that does not work as expected. It does not always unload everything. Module unload module version should always work, because just like module load, module/version always works at all centers, then it's the same for unload. So you may have to give the version. As with the others, you can write module as ml, and you can even use a minus instead of unload for very short. As I said, it doesn't unload the prerequisites. UPMAX NSC is generally not a problem, only if you have loaded one of those that has prerequisites. But HPC2N, LUNARC, C3, SE, PDC, there will be prerequisites. Module purge solves the problem. It removes all the loaded modules. Don't ever do it at PDC. It also removes the 10 or so sticky modules, which are not sticky, but which sets the environment correctly. System modules, yes, I guess we could call them that. There is also a system module at UPMAX, but only on Rackham and Bianca, not the new one, Pelle. But that system module, UPMAX, can easily be reloaded with module load UPMAX. This will basically already do it. So what happens if you unload something that has a prerequisite? That we can actually do at the MSC. Let's see. So MS5 Python 3.11.5. We load this stuff here. And then we load Python. Because this behaves slightly different at the different centers. And now we have something loaded that has a prerequisite. So let's try and remove one of the prerequisites. And then when you do that, it tries to fix it for you. And in this case, it does it by also unloading the Python, and then reloading it with the one that doesn't have prerequisites. It doesn't fix it completely because let's see, it actually didn't load it, and it also kept the now inactive modules. So it breaks, basically. You see, you now have a bunch of inactive modules that may or may not do harm. So that is a thing to be careful with. And this is what we'll see. So let's try then to patch it. And what happened there? Now we're fine. We can now load things again. So it goes well at all of these centers. If you are at Bookmarks, it wipes Bookmarks, but you can load that again, the system module Bookmarks. At PDC, these are all well, it claims, it doesn't say they're sticky actually, but these are all system modules that needs to be there, and there are 12 or 13 of them. And if I load something else and then do purge, then it removes everything except for one of the system modules, and you don't want that. Then basically you then have to reload all of these system modules, or log out and log in again, or you can fix it with module collections. And I will show you in a short time how to make a module collection. Let's jump this exercise because it's the same one as Python one, and we are out of time. Modules show, I already showed you, but in centers that are hierarchical, you need to have loaded the prerequisites first before you can use it. And it then tells you what it will do when you load it. So it tells you that it sets these paths. There is a build-env module, which is, I believe, the same as the build tools. And it is at several of the centers. If you load a compiler toolchain and then the build-env module, you can do module show build-env, and then you will get a lot of useful environment variables that you can use for linking when you're building something, instead of writing the full long list of linking libraries. You can read more about that under extra. So, module help adds centers with flat structure. It can be used on all modules. At hierarchical structures, centers, you can only use it on modules that have already had the prerequisites loaded. Now we come to the module collection, and I'm going to do this example, and I would suggest to type on instance. So what we do here, we load the modules we need and we save the collection. So what do we have here? We have nothing. And I'm going to load these modules here again. You can load any modules you want to. But here I'm just going to load Python 3.11.5 and its prerequisites. So it looks like this. And now I'm going to save this as a collection and call it my Python. And call it what you want to. And then I'm going to do a purge. I have now nothing loaded. But if I then needed my collection, then I can simply reload it. And I do that with ml restore my Python. And I have all of these. If I then want to add something else, let's say I also want SciPy bundle. See. I'm going to try and load this. And it has some prerequisites. Let's check on them. Which ones do I have? 2, 4, 8, 2, GCC 32. I already have that. No, I only have GCC core. So I'm loading GCC. And then I can load the SciPy bundle. Now I have many more modules loaded, and I'm going to say module save, the same name I used before, because now I'm adding to my collection. And if I now, for instance, log out and log in again or do a purge, I can restore it. And it now has the new look as it was. So you can add and remove from your collection. And it is very handy because then you can easily get the same modules loaded. For instance, maybe you create several of these collections. So you have 2 projects, they use different modules always. And you simply create a collection for each of those projects. And then easily you will always be sure to load all of them and the right ones when you need them. And as you can see, this can also be used at PDC, because if you create a collection immediately after logging in, then you can use that when you have done module purge, then you can just restore your collection. So that is one way of doing this. Talked about this, and I will repeat. Don't put it in your .bash.rc modules, because if you load modules there, then you risk in a few months you forget that you had something loaded there, and then you try to load different modules and use them in your project, and things are not working. Much better to do it in a collection. And I'm going to stop here. I think this was just an example that I did here. It's just the same example, but for HPC2N. I'm going to stop because we need a very short break.